Hi, my name is Lyric, and today we are going to be continuing with the conspiracy theory Iceberg by Wendigoon. We are on part 8. We're nearly at the end of this. We're at part 8. As you know, we do all 3 parts of part 8 at one video, so if you think that's pretty cool, who else do you see be doing reactions to this entire conspiracy theory Iceberg? I couldn't find. I think I found one person to do a reaction to the entire thing on YouTube. I mean, come on now. Yeah, make sure to like and subscribe. Let's get into this and not waste any time because it's already going to be a long video.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tier 8, Part 1 of the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg.
Let's go,
I know
Father.
it's been a while, and I'm
Part
so
8.
sorry. I'm sorry to keep you all waiting.
Been a while for me too.
College has
Since
been
we
a lot,
last reacted
but the
to this.
semester's out now, and I am back in the saddle, ready to dive not only into this iceberg, but a bunch of other videos. So stay.
We're going to react to more Wendigoon videos once we get done with the conspiracy theory Iceberg. And we're going to get to newer ones that I haven't seen yet, so I can get more first reactions other than just commentary like I'm doing now.
Back at it. This summer, I'll be doing a lot of cool video ideas, or at least I think they're cool. I hope you think they're cool too. And hopefully you enjoy what comes next. But for now, I know you want to get into this, and I want to get into it too. So as always, thank you for watching, and here we go. Tier 8 is titled The Reality Hacker, and the description reads, "At extreme depths, the very structure of reality as you know it vanishes. Able to control the flow and having mastered the world and those around you, one last question remains. Can you master yourself?" De-patterning is closely related to a concept known as psychic driving. Essentially, psychic driving works like this. It is a concept that by taking a person and making them listen to the same sounds and words and codes over and over, you can begin to work their personality backwards. This is all working off of the idea that a personality is developed by an individual over time and slowly built up as that person grows and matures, which means therefore you can deconstruct it. Or in other words, a means of unlearning learned behavior. There are records of this occurring during the MK Ultra experiments because of course there are. The theory was that showing someone specific
anything psychological related probably happened in MK Ultra.
Audio
anything fucked up psychologically related
and every other way will eventually cause them to begin to forget themselves. So that's psychic driving. De-patterning is everything I just said with electric shock therapy and LSD. De-patterning isn't only
even more like MK
reset
Ultra.
Someone's personality. It's also trying to dig all the way down to their subconscious. The idea being the combination of electric shock therapy and drugs could allow for the observer to speak to the bottom level of a person's psyche. Take that a step further, and some apply this concept to modern media, with the idea being there are very subtle tones and secret messages, and this is similar to backtracking, hidden in a lot of media we consume as a means of keeping us either docile or slowly chipping away at our higher order thinking. Or in other words, your mom was right. Too much TV fries your brain. Illuminati are the good guys is exactly what it says. However, to get to the true meaning of it, you have to analyze the Illuminati itself. See, when the original Illuminati began, because it was an actual organization, in the 1700s, the idea was these French noblemen came together in order to start an organization that would allow for the people to more so govern themselves, or at least a small group of people to decide what happens to them. This was done by having members of the Illuminati infiltrate the government and proliferating the ideas that the group wanted across governments and peoples. However, if the original group standard of self-governance is it, then maybe they're not necessarily as evil as we think they are. This theory is saying that maybe this organization's purpose was to make sure the government doesn't get too out of hand. And considering what governments have been capable of throughout history, perhaps there needs to be a group of people to keep them in check. So therefore, all of that.
So basically, the Illuminati is this big secret society controlling all the government, but that might actually be a good thing to keep the governments in check. Basically what the theory is saying.
Hate we know about them, or ideas of the Illuminati being evil devil
Kinda makes
worshippers,
sense.
would be the result of centuries-long smear campaigns against
Propaganda.
the group proliferated by governments. And this demonization that they have done
That's actually a cool theory to think about. I really like this
would
one.
be a means of making themselves seem the good guys in a historical context. The Illuminati, of course, assuming they do exist, would have to exist from the shadows and therefore cannot defend themselves openly. So think of it this way. If the Illuminati is real and they're working behind the scenes of world governments in order to proliferate the small group's idea, then who's to say they're the bad guys? Because, you know, it's not like a government would lie to us about a group of people who they don't like. I mean, the government doesn't lie, guys. Like, come on. Demolition
Come on,
elves
guys.
refers to
Government
sightings
line?
that have
Nah.
happened across the world that before and after disasters
Never heard of
have
it.
seen these small creatures at the site of the event. Historically, description of these things match up with that of trolls and elves, either short, stumpy creatures that don't have human proportions, or these impossibly skinny figures that seem to dance across the rubble of whatever building just collapsed. The most famous examples of this being 9/11 and the Silver Bridge incident, which after both of them, several witnesses reported seeing small people crawling across the rubble. Theories of these creatures range from everything that they are these evil sort of demons that enact natural disasters in order to be bad, I guess, or that perhaps these things are summoned by the parties in question to get across whatever motive they want. Or perhaps these things are summoned by the parties that actually committed the disaster, because if you think about it, if you believe in demons and you think demon summoning's real, then who's to say that people wouldn't use those capabilities in order to do not so nice stuff. War is fake isn't saying that no wars ever happen, just the motivations for them. A lot of this relates back to shadow organizations and things like the Illuminati. Because if there's things
making
that
up wars
exist
to
in the
cause chaos and
supernatural
stuff.
realm that the regular people don't know about, but these higher elitist rings do, then it makes sense that there would be battling of some kind over them. And if that's true, then several of the wars throughout history that we...
Wasn't one of the theories that we went to like Iran or something to like get like, or Iraq, sorry, I think it was, to get like their ancient, what was it called, the ancient thing from Aliens, I forgot.
As the public,
that was a theory early in the
over
Iceberg.
money or land or what have you could actually be over these more important ideas, like what I
A cave to Hollow
talked
Earth.
about a couple tiers back. The U.S. didn't invade Iraq for oil; it was for the Stargate.
Yeah, so I was thinking about the Stargate.
Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna start,
Obviously,
like,
guys.
a history series on this channel where I take tragedies throughout history, like wars and famines or whatever, and make entirely baseless claims, like the plague. Right? Those people weren't killed by a disease. No, it was giants, and also Hitler. And then I'll just
I'd
turn
watch
off the
it.
comments and say that anyone who disagrees with me is in on the conspiracy.
I'd watch it.
YouTube's so fun. Tesseract, Earth, or universe is referring to the shape of a tesseract. So we understand the universe to exist in 3 dimensions, that being height, width, and depth, right? And this is often shown through the example of a square. If you have a flat square, that's 2-dimensional because it goes height and length. If you have a cube, that's 3-dimensional because it's height, length, and depth. The idea of a tesseract is that it is a 4-dimensional cube, which means it would exist in a 4th dimension that we can't directly observe. As you're probably aware, if you're at tier 8 of the Iceberg at this point, there are several theories about different dimensions that we can't directly see as people, but they would still exist nonetheless.
Right.
The most common of which being time and the idea that it can be manipulated. However, we existing as people can just pass through it at one pace in one direction. So the tesseract existing as a 4-dimensional square, when applied to the Earth or universe, implies that there is these greater 4th dimensional properties that we can't exactly understand. In other words, either the planet we live on or the universe we exist in is moving a lot more complexly than we can see, and perhaps anomalies, which could be everything from random explosions to supernatural sightings, could just be the results of these 4th dimensional occurrences that we can only catch glimpses of. Oh boy, this one. So as soon as
yes.
I started this Iceberg,
JFK
and
shot
scrolled
himself.
through real quick. This was like the first one I saw, and I was thinking, there is no way I can do this, but I'm about to. Remember how in tier 2 of this
JFK shot
Iceberg,
himself.
way back before I was a YouTuber and all, I talked about quantum suicide and immortality? The reason I spent so much time talking about it was to justify this one. In the theory of quantum suicide or immortality, it followed the idea that anything that can happen will happen in one branching universe. So if string theory is to be believed, and if the idea of these infinite universes is to be believed, then that means every possible outcome has to exist within one of these worlds. Which, as I explained with quantum suicide and immortality, that means for every individual, there has to be a universe where they live at a theoretical forever, and a universe in which they commit not alive at every possible point forever and ever. So that means in one existing universe, there has to be a version where John F. Kennedy committed
himself.
suicide while in the motorcade at Dallas. So who's to say that we aren't that universe? Perhaps
Who's to
that's
say?
why the CIA was so weird about it. Because at the height of this political turmoil with Russia, how awful does it look if a leader commits suicide? What if, as Lee Harvey Oswald said, he was the patsy because they needed an excuse? What if the pressure of being the leader of one of the world's superpowers was too much for JFK and he couldn't take it anymore? And what if he wanted to go out during
This is my favorite theory.
with the whole world watching? That, or he just ran a really long string like from the car up to the window and then just was really good at timing. And the best thing,
Really good at
quantum
timing.
suicide and immortality, that had to happen somewhere. Might as well be here.
This is an
And
all-time great
literally
Wendigoon
can't
clip now.
Fight me on it because that's
JFK shot
how
himself.
the theory works. Everything
JFK.
that can happen happens somewhere. So
JFK
here it
shot
is.
himself. You heard
And
it right
if
here,
anyone's
boys.
in the comments calling me stupid for it, well, guess what? They work for the CIA.
Yeah, JFK shot himself.
See, it's that easy. I love my job. Mao statues
Yes.
for Rapa Nuians, which I'm probably pronouncing that wrong.
Hey, look, it's
Again,
Roger Waters.
sorry. Which these statues are the technical name for the commonly known Easter Island statues. See, once the first settlers of the industrialized world arrived at Easter Island, these statues were already in place. According to the mythology of the people, this was statues to commemorate the Rapa Nuians, or the original founders of the island itself. However, there are theories circulating that these old original founders of the island died and were set in their place as the statues. Now, while most normies would take this to mean that the statues were built on top of the Rapa Nuians' gravesite or perhaps their land, cool people believe that perhaps these statues aren't statues at all and are quite...
I like how he's caring less and less as it goes on, just like being like, yeah, normies. Only cool people believe the conspiracy theories. JFK shot himself, boys.
Their land.
You normies believe in they're buried under. Nah, we about to say this
Cool
conspiracy
people
theory right
believe that
now.
perhaps these statues aren't statues at all and are quite literally the fossilized remains of these first people. Or,
Yeah.
in other words,
Giants.
So the Easter Island statues are frozen giants, and just like JFK shooting himself,
you can't prove me wrong.
Math Hacker
Yeah,
has to
frozen
do
giants.
an overarching
Frozen
theory
Roger
of
Waters.
numbers as they exist in the known universe. Because when you think about it, numbers are really amazing in the fact that they can be used to quantify every known occurrence within the known universe, or the fact we can do things like make equations to figure out how the speed of light interacts with blah 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 or whatever. What this theory is saying is that perhaps through the use of numbers, one could gain the ability in order to manipulate reality itself. Or in other words, the secrets of the universe, or the secrets of the simulation we're in, as some would say with this theory, because there's another bigger theory that numbers are the lines of code that exist in our computer, but that's for another day. Math could be
kind of makes sense
to hack
because
the universe.
You used to explain everything.
Real meaning of hybrid RPG was so
kinda
weird
cool
to find information on. So it was a role-playing game called Hybrid that was canceled in 2002. The only existing text file of it is a rule set that the author says is roughly 30% completed at the time of the cancellation. Reading through this thing, not only is it absolutely massive, but it just seems like sort of insane ravings. Like, for example, there are over 500 rules, and the rules are really weird, and they cross-reference each other, so while you're reading one rule, you have to scroll down to like 278, and then that rule is just some talk about how politics works. So then you go back up to 3, and then it says you have to jump down to 400, and the whole thing kind of works like that. Several of the rules are just very long equations for things like how gravity interacts in a sphere and really weird specific stuff. However, what leads to interest are some of the references that are made throughout the rule sheet. Like, for example, one part, the author begins talking about the Matrix and how important it is to understand the walls of the simulation you're within. That goes back to the theory that the real meaning of the hybrid RPG was to create a rule set for the world we exist in, or to create a rule set for a simulation of the world we exist in, or we're the simulation and these are some of the rules for where we exist. That would explain the talk of politics. That would explain why the Matrix and ideas of a simulation were brought up.
That's cool. I like that.
Why
I like that.
Equations for how gravity works and very specific concepts of physics kept being brought up. The idea being that this RPG itself was perhaps a look through the cracks at what our reality actually is, or
that's cool.
a warning to us of what our reality actually is. Deep soy
Nice.
is closely related to the weaponized femboy thing I talked about in the last
Yes,
year.
we're back to the
in that
weaponized
theory,
femboys.
It was the idea that soy is used on other countries as a means of immobilizing their masculine population, whereas deep soy is saying that perhaps the government
This
would
is the
do that same
conspiracies
thing
I was
to
waiting
general
for.
people. The idea being that higher ups have implanted this idea of societal laziness, or in other words, everything is about looking at a screen, sitting down and doing nothing, and letting other people take care of issues for you. And according to the theory,
Why you gotta call me
leads
out like
to
that?
everything from
And you.
obesity rates
Same with you.
going through the roof,
Being called
and
out.
a reliance on law enforcement, as well as a trust of elected officials. Or in other words, people want someone else to take care of the problems because they themselves have been taught to not take care of their own problems. So the idea of deep soy is perhaps governments are immobilizing their people as either a means of just putting domination over them or preparation for some final step of some kind. My money's on the weaponized femboys thing, but I guess we'll have to find out.
Yes.
I don't know if I can say this word on YouTube.
Genetically
Probably
engineered
not.
weaponized femboys.
Tibetan prostitution stocks refers to the rampant rates of prostitution that exist within the region of Tibet. So Tibet politics is weird. Pretty much China tells them what to do and Tibet's not happy about it, or at least from all the research I've done, that seems to be the case. So prostitution's illegal in China,
Yeah.
but Tibet does not care. To put it into perspective,
Simply does not
prostitution is
care.
so rampant in some parts of Tibet that in some of the cities I was reading about, 10% of the women are involved in prostitution, which 10%
Damn.
itself may not seem like a lot.
That's
but
a
think
lot.
if any city that you're familiar with had 10% of the people as prostitutes, what that would mean not only for the economy but of the society
That's insane.
around it. Now again, it's illegal, so all of these are officially done as massage parlors and day spas and other stuff that we all actually know what's going on. So in that whole 10% thing, that's 10% of places where it's a
Real
known
coincidence
fact
here that
it's
10% of the people are working in
prostitution rate,
massage parlors.
which means the actual number is probably higher. So the whole theory around it is, we know that elitist circles and governments like to do not so nice things to people that don't deserve. I'm talking about the Epstein stuff. So the idea being that perhaps China knows that it's such a rampant problem in Tibet but lets it go because it's a means of appeasing their world clientele that they host in this disgusting way. Or in other words, China doesn't do anything about it because powerful, important people in the world doesn't want anything to be done about it. After that last one, this is where I
That would
clarified
make
that
sense.
this is a YouTube channel. I am only making jokes. None of these
Only
are serious.
jokes here. Do not
And
kill me.
Hopefully,
If I
we're
commit
talking about
suicide,
a
no, I
weird one
didn't.
next, so that
I do
it's
not look
fine,
like a
it's just
deer.
Jokes. Haha, jokes. Fire is alive is a concept that fire itself is alive. For
I've heard this theory before. It's not. I don't think this is a bad theory. I think fire inhabits a lot of things about things that are alive. It eats. It grows. It reproduces in a form. Yeah. I think it's just a different type of. You could make a theory. You could make an argument that it's a different type of organism. It's not like the ones we know.
Our concepts of what constitutes life and how many of them fire is in line with. It reproduces. It grows on its own. It
That's what I'm
maintains a homeostasis thermal temperature to itself. It moves on its own. And it eats and excretes on its own as well. Really, the only thing that it doesn't have in common with understood life is that it's not made up of cells. But as we've talked about earlier on this chart, perhaps something doesn't need to be made up of cells or carbon-based in order to exist. In other words, concepts of energy beings or supernatural things from another dimension.
Yeah, there could be beings that aren't
pierce
carbon-based,
through the veil
and
occasionally
fire could be
as
one of
energy
them on Earth.
creatures can be seen with fire itself. Or at the very least, perhaps how plasma is formed within fire and is a constantly replicating energy source. That could be the secret to other forms of life outside of our understanding. Eating food makes you age. While this is apparent on the chart, is technically true because if you don't eat, you'll die, which means you won't get any older. So
These are the conspiracies I was waiting for.
I mean, technically, like, aging is caused by telomeres being cut in the body as someone continues to not die. And technically, the energy that is used from ATP in order to cut these telomeres comes from food. So, I mean, kind of, sort of. But again, the alternative is you die. So,
Yeah.
you know, pick and choose, I guess. Antarctica prevarication is simply saying that the conversation around Antarctica is often kind of weird. Specifically, the way that organizations cover up stuff about Antarctica is odd. Like, for example, there were satellite images of what appeared to be a pyramid that was seen in Antarctica from a satellite, to which the governments collectively all at once went, oh, it's a mountain. Yeah, it's a mountain. So then someone pointed out that there was another pyramid that was very similarly shaped nearby, and they're like, yeah, that one's a mountain too. It's just mountains. Don't look at the pictures anymore. And if you're familiar,
That's not suspicious at all. When someone just looks at a mountain and says it's a pyramid, and all the governments have to come in the world and say, "Hey, but it's just a mountain, bro. It's just a mountain. It's just a mountain." Definitely not suspicious at all there.
with a lot of the hunts for Hitler that happened after World War II, all of the public questioning of U-boats potentially making their way towards Antarctica was shut up immediately, and no one looked into it. Just look at Operation High Jump, which I also talked about in Tier 2 for an example of that. And then you start looking at all the cave systems that may exist underneath Antarctica because of the way poles work.
Hollow Earth.
If the Earth's a magnetic
Hollow
field, then it
Earth.
makes sense that there would be more of a rift of the rock in Antarctica. And then keep in mind that governments just keep on saying that it's a totally desolate wasteland. It's just hundreds and thousands of miles of ice, and there's nothing more to look at. It's just nothing. And then realize that after World War II, the Antarctica Treaty was made, which is an organization of governments that say no normal people can go to the island without government approval. I use island loosely. This thing's like one of the largest continents on the planet. And all the other misdirection and weird secrets that have to do with it. And it makes you wonder. And the more research I do about all this crazy stuff, the more I realize, maybe all those textbooks that I've read that have said the Earth is just a solid ball and there's nothing underneath it besides us are really dumb. Because if you've ever looked at like a porous rock that is full of holes because it has water and stuff on it, and then you think that the Earth is just a giant composite rock with 75% water all over it, and then you think that I'm sure there's nothing beneath us, it's just straight solid rock and everything that the government tells us is true, and there's definitely not giants underneath. And
giants!
I am going off the deep end. All right, back to it. 1800s technology, while vague, there are some really crazy concepts in it. See, in the early 1800s, before we discovered how cool electricity was, technology was going a whole other direction. Like, for example, in the early 1800s, there was a prototype for something known as prana rays, which were essentially sunglasses that, when put on, would supposedly show you the aura of the person you were looking at. Combine that with concepts that in dowsing, there were these special rods that, when held in the air, would bend in the direction of water underneath the earth. And it makes you think of, if it wasn't for electricity and the modern conveniences we have, where technology would have gone in the more spiritual direction. Door dogs are a legend that originates in Africa, which essentially says that whenever someone is about to die, as they're passing through a doorway, a small dog can be seen with them. In every case, the person who is about to die cannot see the dogs themselves. A lot of the first-hand accounts I read were really interesting. Like, for example, there was a European hunter who was in Africa for a while and spoke with several of the locals about the legends of these door dogs, and he himself, while riding, was fearful because earlier that week, when passing through a doorway, a young child asked what the dog was next to him, and of course he couldn't see the dog. To which shortly afterwards, the guy writing this story died. So that's not weird at all. And while the concept of it may be scary,
that's actually
in most traditions I read, it seems as if this is seen as not necessarily a good thing, but a peaceful thing, as if the small dog is a sort of guide or comfort to pass you on into the next life. One worldness has to do with a concept of analyzing humanity itself. Essentially, think of it this way. A lot of the times we look at certain empires that have risen and fallen, or certain groups of people that have gone through trouble, and we see that as an isolated incident, whereas one worldness is saying they are all parts or individuals in the actual experiment that's happening, which is the world. Or in other words, all occurrences that have ever happened are part of one continuous string that we are still on, which would mean that no real change or learned behavior from the previous examples is possible, or the whole those who forget history are doomed to repeat it is sort of an inevitable conclusion, as we're going to repeat the same thing over and over because we're still all part of the same experiment, which all ties back into simulation theory again, because perhaps we were all set up as this program in a computer in order to see what the results of all this would be. I mean, look at me. I'm fake. I'm in a box right now behind a screen talking to you about how you're actually behind a screen. Isn't that just weird? I'm probably fake. You don't know. I may not even be real. See this coffee cup?
Possibly.
This isn't real either. Every time the Johnson
This ain't real.
Earth comes up in one of these videos, I'm just so weird for the rest of it. Fukushima's gateway refers to
Oh, actually, I love
Fukushima
you,
reactor
Wendigoon.
disaster that happened on March 11th of 2011. For those that don't know, Fukushima was a large nuclear power plant in Japan that an earthquake and tsunami destroyed the plant and almost caused a super bad nuclear meltdown. The historical story is very interesting. Short version, essentially what happened is they needed a way to cool down the reactor really fast, and all of the power supplies and all the fail safes had gone bad because of the earthquake and tsunami. So the solution was they just knocked the thing down and had ocean water pour over it as a means of cooling it down so there wouldn't be a like super nuke disaster, which worked. However, the theory is the energy that was released, because there was a lot of radioactive energy released at once, was enough to open up a portal or gateway. This all goes back into the idea that we can't perceive dimensions around us, and as a means to break into these other dimensions, it would take a lot of energy, say a nuclear reactor. So this theory goes a step further and says perhaps the disaster was purposeful, and that's why every single security or failsafe system went down, because someone had sabotaged it. And perhaps either someone crossed over to another dimension or something from the other dimension came here. Which honestly, if you think about it, has anything been normal since 2011? That's what I thought. Lottery exists to catch time travelers. Yeah, this one's fun though.
This
I like
is
the
a good
idea
theory.
that there's an agency
It
in the
makes
future
sense.
that time traveling is such a problem. They're like, oh, we'll go back in time and make there be a lot of money, and then it's just like bear traps set up for people who go back in time. But yeah, this one's fun. I like it. Whatever. Psyops don't
I like that
exist
one.
is referring to psychological operations. This could have a lot of different definitions. However, the most common one is the idea of sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, it's like this. Say that I tell you about the Illuminati, and I say that there's this super evil group of people who work in world governments. And then you get really worried about the Illuminati, so you get all your rich super elitist friends together and say that you all have to go proliferate world governments to make sure nothing bad happens. Which means, because of me telling you that and you trying to react to it, you have created the thing that you were afraid of. Or in other words, paranoia of what might go wrong causes things to actually go wrong, and there's
Which
no
happens in a
fake
lot of
stories that
cases.
exist if people just keep making them boogeyman that they're afraid of. Vertical universe is the counterpoint to a horizontal universe. So say that we're moving through time in existence and everything's kind of flat, like we can move from it side to side. What if it's actually vertical? Or in other words, we are moving in a directly straight line with the existence above us and below us, something that we can't really reach. While this kind of falls in line with a very narrow existence of the universe, as some physicists think that we are in, you could take it a step further and say perhaps ideas of deities and demons are just people in either the future or past who have mastered a way to get to the higher or lower planes of existence. Or kind of the concept we exist as we're walking through a very long skyscraper, and some people have figured out to go to different floors. Prophecies Enforcing Agency is the idea that there are organizations throughout history whose sole purpose is to make sure that prophecies come true. A lot of these theories relate back to the Bible, and specifically the predictions of Revelation that there will be a government in this place and a government doing this, and then this will happen as in line with the end times. And perhaps organizations like the Illuminati or the Freemasons are simply existing behind the scenes to make sure things go to plan. And then I guess it would depend on if these predictions are good or bad, if things like the Illuminati or the Freemasons would be good or bad. And if you look at some of the predictions from the Bible, some of those things are eerily true. So perhaps there are secret people behind the scenes making sure that everything stays according to the higher plan. Consciousness beamed from Moonbase.
Yes.
Okay. A lot of these theories go back to the whole idea of prison Earth, or the idea that we are not native to this planet and that the moon itself is sort of existing as our warden. So our consciousness and our understanding are regulated to make sure we don't get outside of our means of containment. And this also can be in relation to the commonly thought question of what comes first, thought or language, because some people consider it to be impossible to have thought without language. But like, what do you think people who have never heard a language do? Just don't think. So perhaps these greater overlords that have us in prison here aren't just monitoring where we go or what we do, but also how we think. Penergic men, or penergic people, is in reference to special people who have existed throughout history. See, the word penergic itself basically means multiple skills or someone that can accomplish several tasks. And it's basically saying that people throughout history who have accomplished tremendous feats, which is everything from empires to technological advances, are in themselves a higher order of person. And most of the theories of this also go back to simulation theory and say that perhaps every time that we become stagnant within our simulation, a certain character is deposited without them knowing it as a means to.
That's an interesting theory. I like that theory. It's good to think about. Cool to think about.
In other words, protagonists are randomly set up throughout human history as a means of
spice
keeping
things
the
up.
story interesting. And that is it.
I like that
part
one.
1 of tier 8 of the.
All right, so that's it for part 1. Let's go into part 2. All right, now into part 2.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to tier 8, part 2. Of the conspiracy theory iceberg. Thank you all for being so patient and waiting for this. I know that's a while between uploads. Really, what it is that I have to put uploads.
Not anymore. We're doing daily uploads now. Back to it.
For the next conspiracy episode, because some of this stuff is so buried and takes so long to figure out.
Hey, it's understandable. So much research.
3 other videos, but I enjoy it. I have a ton of fun doing it. I know that you all like it, and I appreciate that you all take your time to watch it. So I still love doing it, but just letting you know why I can't do one like every other day. The majority of the research at this point is finding old 4chan threads or websites that were created in 2003 that talk about spacemen and dwarves. So that's where my career's at. A couple things before we get started.
Very nice.
For one, this guy, at the time this video is going to go up, is available for 12 more hours. So today's the last time you
want one.
Link will be in the description. We've sold over 600, which is
get your money, man. Get your money.
Way above what I thought it could possibly do. But you guys never cease to amaze me, and you're fantastic. I'm really overwhelmed. So thank you for that. And like I said, if you're interested, link to him in the description. And also this Sunday, I will be holding a charity live stream. The details of it I will post beforehand, probably a day or 2 in advance. The short rundown, it is for a home in Mexico that
Wendigoon's so great, bro.
Children whose families have been victims of cartel violence. And it's a really good cause, and I want to raise money for them. So it's probably going to be a Resident Evil speed run. No promises on that yet. But the charity live stream will be this Sunday at around 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll be more specific as we get closer. But stay tuned for that. Also, I'll get more sappy at the end. But 370,000 subscribers, guys. I'm blessed.
Hey, what's he at now?
You all. It means a lot.
What's he at now?
Thank you all so much for watching. There was one more thing.
He is at 2.2 million.
Hey, son. It's me from the past. Now,
love to see my guy grow up.
To tell you about something that you should do in the future. As a man who's become the
sounds like my idea
to many boys and girls on the internet for some reason, I'm here to tell you that Father's Day is just around the corner.
This is a sponsorship.
What better gift to give your father or father figure?
I think this is a sponsorship. We're gonna skip. Sorry, Wendy. Sorry, Isaiah. We're gonna have to skip your sponsorship.
It means a lot. Thank you all for watching, and we are back to the video.
Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into it, but as always,
get your money, man. We're gonna have to skip that.
Human immortality, as it's referred to on the iceberg, is tied to something known as the induced and...
By the way, we do have an ad blocker now, so I couldn't... we still have not gotten enough subscribers to afford YouTube Premium, so you still subscribe, but we got the ad blocker, so don't worry about that anymore.
Amnesia theory. Essentially what it's saying, the iceberg is tied to something known as the induced amnesia theory. Essentially what it's saying is that the body itself does deteriorate and eventually die, but the human consciousness lasts forever. Or in other words, it's essentially
that's a scary thought.
As a sort of essence. And it's been the jobs of secret societies throughout history as a means of placing them in their new host. So basically, the soul isn't necessarily a soul that passes on to the afterlife after death, and is instead physically given to whatever the next body's going to be. And
so kind of reincarnation.
Information of this getting out to the public has led to theories throughout history, such as reincarnation. So in other words, humans are immortal, but the body itself is not. Elite controls the population with their permission, has to do with an overarching idea of the New World Order. Basically, the higher ups develop ways in order to thin out populations, whether it be disease every 100 years or wars over points that they don't actually care about. So in other words, if 2 governments come to the agreement that they need to thin out the herd, one will pose a fake threat to the other so that way they can go to war and lower their population numbers. This also applies further into saying that pushes in the media for people to have less children are part of a greater conspiracy, and that fabrications of resource
I mean,
scarcity
overpopulation.
are just that,
Overpopulation is an issue.
fabrications. And if you'll remember earlier in the iceberg, I mentioned the Georgia Guidestones, which, if I believe right, it said population needs to be kept to 500 million.
When I say overpopulation is an issue, I mean like the having less kids thing isn't necessarily, you could say, that bad of a thing. Starting wars, but then you're on population, yeah, that's pretty bad.
This would
Obviously,
be the
yeah, that's true.
way of getting to
This is not that
Bugsy on
unbelievable
this
a
iceberg
theory
is referring to the movie
for it to be in tier 8.
Bugsy, which is a movie about the gangster known as Bugsy Siegel. Bugsy Siegel was a mobster who was killed by the mob because he was supposedly stealing money and incorrectly managing funds. Bugsy renovated and began the Flamingo Casino in Las Vegas, which at the time was pretty much just a water hole in the middle of the desert, and many believe Bugsy as being the one who made Las Vegas what it currently is. However, it's with these funds that he got from East Coast mafia groups in order to start and renovate the Flamingo Hotel that he started to scrape money off the top, which of course they didn't like. So then he was murdered and went down as history as being a bad guy who started one of the most famous cities in America. The theory is that the movie Bugsy, which portrays him as a sort of charismatic gangster archetype in movies, was created in order to take prejudice away from the ideas of Sin City itself. Or in other words, Las Vegas, which is known as the city of sin and has gambling and all that stuff, didn't want their image tied in with an evil gangster, so they made a propaganda piece so
good
people
gangster.
felt better about the city itself. TimeCube was a website developed by Gene Ray in 1997. And to be honest with you guys, Gene is an absolute crackpot. Basically, the gist of what he said is that time itself does not work in a linear line, and is instead 4 sides that we travel through. Because of this, every single day 96 hours actually occur, but we only experience 24, whereas the other hours are experienced in those respective timelines. So basically, you could think of this as string theory or alternate realities, only instead of like infinite, it's just 4. It goes on to say that at midday and midnight, the sun and moon of each of these realities are perfectly in sync with each other, and people cross over into other ones without realizing it. So
Mandela
basically,
effect.
Explanations to the Mandela effect and stuff like that are due to people accidentally crossing over whenever all 4 planes line up. I also have to mention, because I can't not mention this, he said that standing at each of the corners as guardians were Jesus, Einstein, Socrates, and Bill Clinton. So remember, kids, if you ever experience
yes, the 4 guardians of life: Jesus, Einstein, Socrates, and Bill Clinton.
effect and think you may have gone into an alternate. So remember, the corners as guardians were Jesus, Einstein, Socrates, and Bill Clinton. So remember, kids, if you ever experience the Mandela effect and think you may have gone into an alternate reality, blame Bill Clinton. Technocracy theory is something in itself that's kind of theorized, the idea that the world itself is run by technology. However, this is specifically saying that an AI system runs everything. The idea being that over the years, as we've become more reliant on technology, the higher-ups or elitists have built machines in order to tell us what to do. This all has to do with the illusion of choice. So say an election, for example, you may vote expecting a candidate to get it, whereas the AI has already predicted the best turn of events and decided what's going to happen. The idea behind it being that free will throughout time has been replaced with comfort, and that now in these final stages of a technocracy that we have built for ourselves, the AI makes every decision, but we've given away so much free will at this point we can't even tell. Wedico is a Native American legend that has the spirit of greed and selfishness. The basic idea behind this is that it is a virus that can infect people if people allow it to, that makes someone become more self-desired and individualistic instead of caring for a community. The root word of Wedico is the same root word for Wendigo, whereas the Wendigo has to do with someone becoming cannibalistic and the desire of gluttony that overtakes them. Wedico is essentially the same thing applied to greed and pride, which Wendigo, I definitely haven't heard of that ever. What this is saying in the grander sense is perhaps this disease of the Wedico has affected entire countries or potentially the world at this point, as over the last 100 years, society has gone from the idea of forward progression as a whole and instead looks at progression of the self. So basically a soul virus has made us all bad people. which
Right.
isn't the weirdest on this iceberg. All right, so
True.
I've got to be careful with this one, not because it's any like, oh no, the government's going to come shoot me for it, but this is like a real group of people, and I'm pretty sure I know what this conspiracy is hinting at, but at the same time, it's not like proven anywhere, and I don't want to, just be mean. Off the coast of North Carolina, there is a group known as the Bald Head Association. And to answer your first question, no, they're not actually bald. It's because they
Great.
are on an island known as Bald Head Island. So these guys have a
right.
website, they have a homeowners association, everything's fine until you start to look at some of the things surrounding the Bald Head Association. Like, for example, reading about them in the news, there was some controversy where after a hurricane, the members of the association managed to sort of apply resources to their community instead of communities around, which from what light research I've done into that topic, it seems people weren't that happy about. As well as there was some investigation to a private ferry company and an idea of a lot of money going somewhere, and a current charge pending that they kept a federal agent from performing their duties, whatever that implies. And this is all speculation, and I'm like researching this stuff with the point of view of some deep, dark, scary thing. So I don't want to go any further, because it's one thing to talk about, weird, crazy lizard people in the ancient world, and it's another thing to point at a modern group of people and just be like, haha, you do crime, because there's really no evidence of that. And I don't want to be mean. Like, everything on the surface seems like they're sweet people, and I feel bad for a YouTube channel just looking at their stuff and being like, I can make a problem here. Water is not from Earth. It has to do with the concept of the creation of water itself. For one, water itself is a volatile compound, and while you may not think it, it itself is naturally acidic and can do things like erode rocks over time. And while now on Earth with the water cycle, where water is evaporated and then reformed over and over, there doesn't seem to be a sort of jumpstart process that would have put that into place. So theories range from everything that perhaps a meteor hit the Earth that either had oxygen or hydrogen with it that then interacted with the atmosphere and created the first batch of water, or that water itself as a whole came to the planet from an outside source, which, if that was true, that water came from somewhere else, then that would imply the chance of existence of life somewhere else. Basically, the idea that water was deposited here rather than being created here. RuneScape conspiracies is specifically referring to the most famous RuneScape conspiracy around New York City. The idea being that RuneScape itself exists as a New York City virtual counterpart. Evidence of this is everything from the game consists of large different ethnicities that come from separate boroughs that all interact within the same main space. There's forms of begging, there's different ways to make money, and the richest most often are those who play the stock market. People inherently can't be trusted, and there's a selfishness when it comes to greed and how to obtain money within the
Seems
game,
like New York.
which is kind of mean to New Yorkers, but whatever. There are events and functions that occur in which people gather and celebrate before going back to their domain, and there's even an underground transport system throughout the entire map. So the theory states that perhaps RuneScape was put together as a means of testing a sort of feudal post-apocalypse New York City. And it goes even further and says that perhaps RuneScape was created by the government as a way to monitor either transaction as it corresponds to the real world, or potential transaction if New York City was to fall apart. So if you've ever played RuneScape, I guess you work for the Fed. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
The people of Kalagasi has to do with a mine located in Chile. In 2013, roughly 35 people witnessed what they all claimed to be a UFO flying over the mine itself. It stayed there for a few minutes and fit the typical description of a sort of flying saucer. However, while the flying saucer was above them, people looked around them and saw several what appeared to be concrete people standing in their midst. They were all gray, made of stone, and were all sharing their same position, looking up at the
Minecraft I am stone challenge.
As people began to panic, the flying saucer left, and with it, the concrete people just disappeared. Theories on this have ranged from everything to ancient religions, to perhaps these are expressed forms of the extraterrestrials themselves, and of course to it being just a hoax, which is always so lame. I hate whenever you're reading these and they're just like, yep, it's probably fake. It's like, do you ever get out of the house? Codification is one of those that makes me absolutely hate this iceberg, because it's just one word and good luck figuring out the conspiracy around it. Because codification is a real thing that happens in politics, so I can only assume it means that. But with the rest of this iceberg, I feel like there should be some giant multi-level code that creates humans or something, but no, it just has to do with like county politics. Basically, codification is a term that is applied to whenever governments move counties or demographics of people in order to fit new voting codes. Basically, if they look at districts in a state when it comes to voting, and they see that one population greatly outweighs the other, so they change the rules of where the lines are in order to better fit the demographics. This form of sort of moving the goalpost has led many to think that perhaps as a means of keeping the people from actually having a say in what happens to them, whenever people begin to band together in order to make a difference, the state itself will just change the rules so that it doesn't really matter. So this is an elaborate way of them
like
to
gerrymandering,
maintain the agenda that they want, and simply give the people an illusion of choice. Inverted humans is in reference to ancient artwork that depicts exactly that, upside down people. In other words, across a lot of old world drawings, there is a consistent theme of a group of normal people, you know, standing upright, surrounding someone in the air upside down. Now, while many just interpret this as a form of art, others have pointed out the weirdness that it occurs in a lot of cultures in the similar way. And in some of these that have descriptions attached, such as in the Middle East where there's images of it, there's references to them going from soil to sky. So being upside down and from the ground to sky, that sounds like Hollow Earth to me. And you know, normally these inverted people are, you know, like taller than the people on the ground, you know, tall underground.
It always comes back. Giants
is in reference to
it always comes back to it.
Weird fact that people who speak the Italian language over time have a change in their DNA. Now, this isn't enough that like a human can transform their physiology from just speaking Italian, but it is enough that through DNA testing there is a difference seen before and after someone moves to Italy. And while the specific
really weird
and the greatest results have been seen from the Italian language, this has been found in certain instances around other languages too. This goes back to the idea that languages themselves have a sacred meaning, and that some languages have the power to induce life in different forms. This is a big reason that ancient spells and things like that are said to be done in Latin or other old languages, because the language itself has a hidden biological power. So in other words, words spoken in certain language can induce a literal soulful or life energy that another language could not. Saint Alvin's creations is in reference to the video game developer Saint, and specifically his most popular creation of Schnell online. You can find footage of Schnell itself on YouTube, but it's a sort of weird multiplayer game. Several have compared it to Second Life in the way that it's a bunch of characters together just sort of interacting with each other. However, there's a lot of weird themes in it that have to do with things like physical violence and even terrorism. And while I myself have not played the game or watched a ton of gameplay on it, people online have said that there's even themes that have to do with people doing things to, you know, like kids. So people have said perhaps this game exists as a means of a outlet for terrorists and these people who do not nice things to kids. On top of that, there's a credit trading system in the game which people will convert into real money in the real world. So there's even an idea that money laundering occurs through it, through these illegal transactions. Or I should say transactions for illegal goods that are hidden through this game. Now this is all, of course, like tier 8 conspiracy. Do not actually harass the creator of this game. This is all like through the grapevine. I'm sure that's not actually what it's for, but be nice. But yeah, that's the theory. 90% of books written by one author isn't saying that there's some guy who's existed for like 800 years who's just been hurriedly writing books, although at this point, why not? But this ties back into the simulation theory. Put it this way, right? You've been in a bookstore. So you've seen like the near infinite amount of paperbacks that have totally unrecognizable titles that are just sitting on the shelves. Well, several of those books are fill-ins that are made in order to enhance the simulation and make things feel more real. And realistically, there's no way you could ever...
It's like a Minecraft bookshelf. You can't get the books off of.
Like, go ahead, try. You try to read through every book in your local bookstore, and then another one, There's eventually going to be pages somewhere that you aren't getting to, and that those are just filler, because according to this, whatever you do look at, the simulation prepared for and put real words there. So try
Damn.
not to let that bug you. CCAXX1 is in reference to the launching of the Zuma satellite. Basically, the Zuma satellite was a satellite that was launched by SpaceX. However, the details around it are really shady. Like, for example, the creators of the Zuma satellite never wanted themselves to be known and even loaded the rocket themselves. And supposedly CCAXX1 is the code that was given to whatever was on board. Theories say that perhaps whatever's on board is a form of biological testing, more specifically testing on amoebas in order to create a sort of super amoeba. And again, at this point in the research, it's really hard to find direct lines connecting things, but a lot of people tie the Zuma satellite into the concept of brain-eating amoebas, which when you think about it, brain-eating amoebas are like really weird that they exist. Like the fact there's like trillions and quadrillions of amoebas everywhere that at any point don't cause any harm, except a few that just eat your brain. So this is saying that perhaps these amoebas are genetically engineered, and the Zuma satellite is either a means of maintaining them or to enhance them somehow away from Earth. Holy Grail, found centuries ago, is in reference to the Holy Grail and the idea that perhaps elitist rings have been using its power for a long time. Historically, the Holy Grail is the chalice that Jesus drank from at the Last Supper. And the idea around it is that if anyone drinks from the Holy Grail, they'll have eternal life, knowledge, and a whole slew of other abilities. The idea being that historical figures have been drinking and getting the power of the Holy Grail for hundreds of years, and the reason that secret societies are able to be maintained for so long and continue so efficiently despite having a rotating list of members is because the highest up members have been eternal and there from the start. Bovine hormone conditioning has to do with another level of population control. So you know how you hear that in recent years all of the hormones injected into cows is making people sick? Well, the main explanation that you hear from that is that growth hormones are put in them in order to make them grow faster, so that way they can put out more meat. However, this theory is saying perhaps dangerous toxins are purposefully deposited in these bovines because, for one, it would go undetected, and two, it's a good means of curbing the population. Because at that point, trying to get anyone for making the cows have bad chemicals in them is the equivalent of pointing your finger at the boogeyman. This is similar to the soy theories I mentioned before, with the idea that the government is doing all of this stuff to the food that we eat as a means of changing our physiology. Only whereas soy was making men weak, this is making cows kill you. XRA Psyops has to do with the Adult Swim cartoon Xavier the Renegade Angel. The idea behind it is that the show itself was created as a means of anti-religion. Not only that, but that the show itself proliferates ideas such as degeneracy and kid stuff, and that specific degeneracy combined with a lot of themes of blood rituals and stuff like that is a means of normalizing the population at large with things like the Epstein rituals. So in other words, these elitists who kidnap children and perform blood spells created a show on Adult Swim so that whenever it's brought to light, you'll be like, hey, that's just like that cartoon. I make jokes like that now, but the way we're heading, I wouldn't be surprised at all if whenever all that stuff comes to light, people are just like, oh, okay. Bug chasing is a real thing that is awful. So bug chasing is a thing that happens in online crowds where people want to both contract and give STDs to as many unknowing people as possible. This is most often done with things like HIV,
why would you do that?
They refer to as the gift. And several people in these online communities take on roles as the hunters and prey, with some people even trying to collect as many STDs as possible within their body. While a lot of it is consensual, or basically they want to have the disease put into them, several are serial killers in everything but name and just try to give it to as many people as possible, which is absolutely evil and disgusting and horrible. And I read stuff like that, and then I think back to like the Epstein people making a TV show in order to make themselves more okay, and I'm like, all right, I could see it. Hostile plants has
It's
two
understandable.
branching theories off of it. One being the idea that hostile plants themselves are a sort of genetic experimentation, or at least are behind the scenes being genetically experimented on. Like, for example, take bananas and watermelons and other plants that over time we've genetically engineered to be bigger to suit our needs. So, for example, if there's some like umbrella corporation kind of company out there who sees the Venus flytrap and is like, I bet we can make that thing eat people, which would make a
Understandable.
form of self-sustaining security. The other idea is that the existence of hostile plants, or in other words, plants that have adapted in order to be aggressive in their environment, implies that at one point they were potentially competitors with life as we know it. Like the whole idea in evolution that things evolve certain characteristics in order to be more fierce. Well, this is saying that because plants did that, there's potential that if it wasn't for people or life, that they would keep doing that, and then eventually it'd be giant plant monsters everywhere. Upward causality is
That's an
cause
interesting
and effect as
thing
we
to think about.
understand it, only backwards. So for example, in an ecosystem, let's say you have water that comes down from the sky. So then that water adds water itself to the ground. Plants take in that water, plants feed the animals, animals feed the other animals, etc. That's the principle of how the world itself works in something called downward causality. Or in other words, things start at the top, and as they continue through the flow of the ecosystem, things change. Upward causality is the other way around. So the animal that needs to eat another animal makes that other animal have the desire to eat food, which makes the food have the desire to take in water, which makes the sky produce more water. While this is a real backward thought of how things work, it
Right.
does tie in well to things like simulation theory. So for example, you as the person need to intake food, so the system itself puts more food into it, which means it has to supply water for the food and blah blah blah. What it basically comes down to is the idea that the most affected in a society are actually creating the effect itself. So rather than being beings that inhabit a biosphere, you yourself are the creator that changes the biosphere around you. It's really like confusing and out there and weird ideas, but this is tier 8. What did you expect? Lithuanian poems
Yeah.
has to do with Lithuanian poems that
Who'da
were
thought?
discovered in the early 1900s that seemed to correctly predict events that would happen in the future. Specifically, several of these poems from Europe correctly described things like the Holocaust and the World Wars 20
Damn.
to 30 years before they ever came to be. With some records saying that these poems actually originated in the 1800s, so tack on another 100 years to that. What's interesting is that several of these
Nice.
influences of Lithuania come from Sanskrit text, which, if you'll remember, I talked about earlier in the Iceberg. Sanskrit text itself is interesting because they had all the predictions of what comes in the future as well as aliens. So through the whole grapevine, we can see that perhaps this alien influenced society influenced another society that was able to correctly predict things that would happen a century in advance. So basically, aliens tell a group of people who tell another group of people, and then they predict World War II, which at this point makes perfect sense. And that is it for Tier 8 Part 2 of the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg.
All right, let's end the part 2. Let's go on to part 3. All right, now on to part 3. This guy's here. I have no idea who this person is.
Hello. We should
No idea who the person is.
clap say. Oh, fine.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tier 8 Part 3 of the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg. I am so excited to get to some of this information because, like, ever since I first looked at the list, I wanted to just spend the whole time, and I know this, I say this with a few of the intros, but I wanted to just, like, get into all the really weird and out there concepts with UFOs and, like, evolution.
That is why we brought this person here.
What?
They know all about the really strange.
Yeah, I hang out with you.
This is why they're here.
And of course giants, so you know. And now we're getting to the point where we get a focus
Giants.
on that, and it just feels
Okay.
so rewarding. Now we're up to, I think, like 417,000 subs, and it's so weird. Like I got nostalgic doing this. Like whenever I started this series, I was at like maybe 700, 8, and now we're
If you're here for the final tier, we both gotta wear Hawaiian shirts. For the end of the iceberg.
Yo, that's a great idea. I have plenty.
here.
I see.
And so many people have joined on the ride
Y'all.
as we've been going.
Do you think it's a good idea?
And I really can't thank you.
I wasn't
enough.
pointing for you, just pointing at
Thank
them.
you.
Just say,
One
hey,
quick
it's a good idea.
announcement I want to say before we get started is I've
Do you have a
decided that
Hawaiian
once
shirt?
this entire series
No.
is over,
But I'll get
what
one
I'm
for the
gonna
video.
do Is
can give you one
I'm
of
going
mine.
to take the entire iceberg, every single video, cut off all of the intros and outros, and then make it one video. That way, if any of you all or people later on down the road who find it want to listen through it without all of the starts and stops in the playlist, it'll just be one like 11-hour video of everything at once. That way there's less mid-rolls, that way it takes up less time, etc. And
Shortest
it's really
Wendigoon
wild
video.
that we're almost to the end of this
Shortest.
thing. I'm having a great time and I'm going to enjoy it to the end. So
Very
thank you
great
all for
time.
being here and thank you for watching.
Almost a normal white
I'm
man.
sure just
in the-
like me, you feel like a
Appalachians.
psychopath at this point for enjoying it. But that's okay. Psychopaths are people too. But you know what? You don't have to be a psychopath
Good message.
to enjoy.
I like the
Nope,
shirt
no, no,
change.
no, 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 no!
Wait, what?
We skip past the sponsor, because unless they pay us as well. That's how it works, okay?
Helps me, it helps the
But you'll watch every ad.
Yes, exactly.
channel. But
I can't skip past the
always,
ads. I got ad blocker now,
thank you
okay?
for
So,
watching. Aliens caused the bubonic plague is the theory that aliens caused the bubonic plague. The
would've
bubonic
thought?
plague, also known as just the plague or the Black Death, was a disease that swept through mostly Europe but the rest of the world in the 14th century. It's estimated to have killed 25 million people, or a third of the world's population. There were several prevailing theories at the time that mostly came from the church, that the bubonic plague was either God's punishment for the immorality of the people, or that it was a curse brought on to them by the devil or witches. And that witch thing is interesting because there's several theories that things relating to astrology and spells and sorcery are the relation of extraterrestrial beings. So combining some of the ideas we've talked about in the iceberg up until now, you take ideas that aliens create magic or that aliens are just beings in a plane that we can't see. So if you think the bubonic plague was caused by sorcery, then that sorcery may not have been of Earth. And the motivations for this could be population control, an attempted total extermination, who knows. Enchanted websites is related to the idea
That is
there
why
is a
we have the
sort
Holy
of
Bible
fake
here to protect us.
success that is bestowed on
To protect
some
from the aliens.
people through the use
The
of
Holy
magic.
Bible protects
While
from
there's a joke
aliens.
somewhere in here about
don't
how
ask
it's
why we have the Holy Bible right here. We have to get it for watching Wendigoon, though.
Get there. The idea is that
To get through the
certain
enchanted
things people
websites.
came to the power that they have through the use of these magical enchantments. In research for this, I came across
totally
a
didn't keep
website
that on.
called Enchanted
Definitely did not
Websites
forget to turn off
that
the
is
PS4
really, really old
background
and
noise.
was advertising that they can make you famous by just having them on your website. They kept talking about all their clientele who went on to great success and saying that they can bestow their special capabilities onto whatever you're already using, and then you'll get popular. Of course, I tried to see if I could get some
Definitely not cultish.
whatever advice, but all the websites and links were dead, so sad. But it all relates back to that greater theory that some of the success we see in the world of whatever's popular is artificial. Sun collapse is
Jeff
related
Bezos
to
made
the
all his money?
concept of solar farming. Solar
Enchanted
farming is
websites back in the 90s or 2000s where he made his website.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
exactly what it says. The fact
Sun
that
collapse.
us as humans continuously farm the energy that's expelled by the sun. The basic idea with this is that we're farming it too much. In other words, through using its heat or its light in order to grow agriculture or
See, Mom, this is why I'm not going outside.
just solar
Yes,
panels,
to keep the
we
sun
are
from
taking away
collapsing.
from the
Exactly.
equilibrium that once existed.
The
And
more
it all
grass
goes
I
back to
touch, the
whole
closer we get
idea
to
of, like,
extinction,
energy
Mom.
conservation. And essentially, while the sun's believed to be a burning star, this is saying that the net value of heat that it expels has to be kept at a sort of even level, and that we're throwing that too much in the balance will eventually make the sun run out of energy and therefore collapse, and then we all die. So neat. Microchips found in fossils.
Only
is
happy
not
thoughts
a
on this
joke,
channel.
and there have
Wouldn't
been
that mean that
fossils
a-
have been opened.
Would that just be like a Dyson sphere would just immediately make the sun blow up?
This.
That's kind of the whole thing about a Dyson sphere. Is it harvests
Yeah, it harvests
all
the
of
sun's
sun.
energy, yeah. Not related to the
sun
Dyson
nuke.
fans.
Vacuums? Dyson makes
Opened up
vacuums.
and things found that were initially said to be microchips. Now, in every single one of these stories, the details of it have been walked back.
You want to know what the opposite of micro is?
What?
Macro? You know what macro means?
What is-
Giant.
Afterwards, For
It all
example, the T-Rex
connects.
bone that had a microchip found in it, they later said was a
You know how big dinosaurs are?
How big are dinosaurs?
I'll give you the honor.
fossil of some ancient
not gonna do it.
bacteria.
Not gonna do it that time.
Another one they said was
You
just
can't-
a
you-
bone
you can't-
fragment
you
that
can't
looked
overuse
a
the
lot
giants.
like a
Can't milk the
microchip.
giants
And
dry.
kind of related, I
If you say it too
remember
much, they'll come
research
from the Hollow Earth.
about stories for previous sections about fuses being found in ancient pots. So, for example, they open up this.
I think giants produce like milk. Like, are they mammals? Like,
This has nothing to do with microchips being found in dinosaurs.
how do they? Okay, we gotta ask. Okay, we have to ask.
We're
some
adding
questions.
new entries.
We need
We're adding new
content.
entries to this iceberg.
Okay, this is not just your normal watch video for money. Okay, even though you don't get any money from this, this is. We gotta ask some questions.
We
Are
ask
they
questions.
mammals? Do they?
I mean, they're
produce
kind of like
milk?
humans, so they would be mammals.
Okay. I want giant titty milk, like
New
Like-
fetish unlocked.
bigger.
Are
Like
great
we've seen
for
like
going
mommy
through all of the
milkers,
pots
giant
in
mommy
there, and they
milkers.
find what appears to be modern day
I'm
fuses.
invading
Resident
Hollow
Evil.
Earth.
Resident
All
Evil.
relates
I'm
back
doing a Hollow Earth now.
to a concept called the Great Reset, which I don't know how much in detail I want to get about it now because I'm pretty sure like the Great Reset itself is mentioned later on. But short version for now, the Great Reset says that we constantly exist on a cycle. We go from the first remnants of humanity to a point where we destroy everything, and then thousands or millions of years later, the whole cycle repeats.
Turn it
itself.
off, turn it
Now,
back
to
on again,
explain things,
and then it'll work.
like why the Earth is
Yeah.
100 million years old, humanity only has history around 10,000. The idea being we'll all get wiped out, there will be a reset, and then those people that come however many million years from now will find remnants of our existence and then gather them. The reason that T-Rexes had microchips on them, and the reason people used to put fuses in jars. That's your basic intro. I'm sure it'll come up later. If not, I'll do a video on about it. Whatever, next topic. The Black Snake prophecy relates to a legend of the Lakota tribe. Essentially, the Native American tribe of the Lakota had this legend that near the end times, a great black snake would come across the land and destroy everything. The legend says that it will desecrate ritual sites, that it will destroy villages, and that it will come from the ground and then return back to the ground. As many modern Lakota members have pointed out, this is a perfect example of the ideas of oil pipelines, roadways, and other modern industry. The idea being the idea of a great black snake coming and destroying the ritual sites of the Lakota, and now a giant oil pipeline is trying to do the same thing is alarming. But politics aside, this has a greater expanding idea when it comes to prophecy. Things that most people would brush off as being not true, if you can view the black snake as being the modern fulfillment of an old prophecy, then what other old prophecies could also be true? Things I mentioned like the Wendigo, a disease that essentially consumes someone with greed, could be the idea of modern corporatism. You could take it on and on and on and say maybe some of those crazy spiritual beliefs weren't so crazy after all. Underground caverns. Ooh boy. So every time another hollow
That's how you know stuff's about to get real.
We know where this is
Earth
going.
theory thing comes up, I mentioned sort of a different facet of it, and one day I'm going to do a video putting it all together, but there's a few I want to go over with this one. For example, the Tibetan holy books said that beneath Mount Everest specifically, there were these tunnel systems that went all over the world. Now, if you know anything about cave systems, the majority of them are completely unexplored. Near a cave system that I live by that's a popular tourist attraction, they've tried to drop trackers into riverways to see where they end up, and they will totally disappear forever.
It's weird that he's talking about caves and he got stuck in one.
You guys stuck in a cave?
You watch the Internet Historian?
No.
Dang it.
And
Somebody will get that
also,
reference.
The majority of
Not me.
underground systems are closed up by the government, and in most cases, it is a felony if you destroy or try to get access to them.
We can react
This
to Man in
leads
Cave
back
next.
into the thing I've kind of hinted at in a lot of theories, that the entire world has these underground systems that work towards the bigger concept of Hollow Earth. And think about it, every single group of people have some form of legend of creatures living underground. Either it be old Chinese tales of frogmen that come from underneath caves, or old
Frogmen.
night stories of these troglodyte creatures.
I'm pretty sure that was early in the iceberg. It was like people in Iran that would just make statues of like normal
Lizard
people.
people. Yeah.
Normal people. And then
They
they'd
just
be
have
make-
like lizard heads, right?
and yeah, and then they just randomly
Yeah.
make a statue of a lizard person. You'd be like, and you'd be like the normal humans, just being like normal.
No one thinks
They
it's
would
weird.
fight
It's
on
just-
their
like, no one even
expeditions.
considers it to be
Even
weird.
religions with the common idea that demons live underneath, or the idea that you can dig your way down into hell. That, combined with the fact that it's believed underneath the pyramids is a massive underground cave system, or the idea that these random structures on Antarctica were constructed a long time ago as a signal to get underground for some reason, and other ancient societies.
Can we talk about the bop that is this background music though?
Dude, Wendigoon conspiracy theory iceberg music goes hard. Okay.
Like you'll go on for like an hour not realizing there's even music, and then the moment you tune into it, it just slaps.
It just
Who
slaps.
had a distinct interest with caves, and some of them disappearing altogether at once.
Wait, and here's Sneaky
Makes you wonder.
Snitch.
Biblical aliens is basically the idea that several things that are mentioned in the Bible as rather innocuous concepts are actually about extraterrestrials. Put it this way, there's a ton of mentioning in the Bible,
Holy
especially
Bible.
in the Old Testament, that people will worship the stars and the things in them. Well, if you think about other concepts we've talked about of UFOs and the fact that they've been here for however many thousand years, then it puts together the idea that these people may not just be worshipping the constellations. And some take this to mean several mentions in the Bible of
Scientology.
either angels or these great sightings appearing before people,
With a
or
little less
aliens
creepy.
being described by
I think
prophets.
Scientology.
Some
Wait, okay, so what are you talking about with Scientology?
Scientology and their religion, they believe like aliens came. I don't.
Okay, giant spaghetti monster, right? Something like that.
No.
No, no,
Not giant spaghetti monster.
Okay.
Scientology, they believe in like
Okay.
it's a religion around alien stuff, and it's really creepy because people like Tom Cruise are in it and John Travolta, and the wife of the leader went missing in 2007, hasn't been seen since, and no one's investigated it.
Oh, that's yeah. I love uninvestigated disappearances.
Isn't it so great when a organization with multiple millionaires in it and just with billions of dollars worth of freaking places and stuff, the leader of that area, the wife just goes missing in 2007 and no one investigates it?
go as far
Not a
as to
single
say biblically
ounce of
accurate
money is
angels
put into
are
finding
Not
a
one
literal,
money.
just human being.
extraterrestrials look like, which is a terrible.
There was someone who left the church, and she then got out and spoke bad about the church and stuff they did. And one of the things she said was like, "Hey, I asked them one day, hey, where's your wife at?" And the guy got super mad at me and like yelled at me, and like everyone was pressing me about it because I asked where the leader's wife was. And then Scientology made an entire YouTube channel of people in her life, anyone in her life, her parents, people she met one time, saying bad things about her. And I don't mean like defamatory things. I mean just like, she was rude to me. One time. They got a housekeeper who she met one time saying that she was a bad client. An officially licensed thing by Scientology made a YouTube channel about this. Just because of, I mean, and all their videos on that channel, likes and dislikes are turned off, all comments are turned off.
You speak bad about us, we're gonna make you look slightly disfavorable in the eyes of the public.
Like, they made a whole video saying, "Oh yeah, she's just making this up. You know she's not missing. Then where is she? How busy is she? She hasn't been seen since 2007. You know how old I was in 2007? 1. I was a fat 1.
I was born in 2007.
Bro.
Horrifying concept. Air's poison isn't necessarily saying air is going to kill you, even though technically it kind of does, but that's besides the point. More so, it's saying that air is a drug. For one, oxygen itself is a sort of like hallucinogenic, and if you take 100% oxygen at once, you can pass out or get very lightheaded. The idea being all the trace particles that we breathe in every day from the point that we're born till now create a sort of blurred idea of what reality really is. So that asks the question, if air causes these sort of long-term psycho...
You're not going to open it like that, my guy.
then
Struggling to open this. In case
There you go,
anyone's
you
wondering,
got it.
because I was trying to keep it off screen, but it just took me way too much effort for me
Yeah,
to
it took
keep
too much
hidden.
effort to hide that, my guy.
what does reality really look like, and has anyone really seen it? This could also explain why things like the supernatural and spirits aren't visible to us, because maybe there's a sort of fog in the way of our viewing. The Luna Park
They're the real
Train
things.
Fire Demon, which is one heck of an entry title, on June 9th...
And a great band name.
Dude, first of all, just it's like Linkin Park, but like on the moon.
Luna Park Train Fire Dragon is a great band
The
name.
Luna
Demon.
Park amusement park had a ride
Dumbass.
known as the Ghost Train that
What'd I
caught
say?
on fire and ended up
Dragon?
killing 7
Oh,
people.
sorry.
The story itself was really tragic. Basically, people who were on the ride were killed while within the ride from a very brutal...
I want to apologize. That was uncalled for.
typical fire. And an investigation that occurred later ruled that the fire was caused by an arson on purpose, although the perpetrator was never caught. Then one day, while a woman who lost her son and her husband to the fire was going through pictures of the park that day, she came across this image. Now, other than being
That's
absolutely
Terrifying.
the person in the costume is especially alarming, as no one was able to find him after the event. There was never a record of them hiring or having a costume like that because, duh, why would a park make that a mascot for kids? And from all points and records, this guy did not work at the park and was just a bystander. So
Come on, he just listens to ICP. Come on. just a traveling juggalo. He wanted to go to the park, and now
Come
we're just
on.
blaming all of this on him.
So
Come
for
on,
one,
man.
It's really creepy that guy was there on the day of the fire. And two, it's doubly creepy that presumably the dad or someone took a picture with their kid next to him. What some have pointed out that's especially creepy about this
Best
is
dad
that
of the
the
year.
costume bears a striking resemblance to Moloch. Moloch is one of the gods of the Canaanites mentioned in the Old Testament of the Bible. Essentially, Moloch is always depicted as the golden bull with horns, that the primary form of worship was to burn children at the altar of it, which led to these horrifying statues of
I
golden.
know we're kind of making jokes, but this is unironically one of the most creepy things in this
Oh,
iceberg.
yeah, it's terrifying.
This is terrifying, bro. The fact that that's a real picture.
Wait, okay, before you unpause, how do a group of people as a religion decide we're gonna burn our
We're
children
gonna
because
burn-
this thing might exist? But honestly, now that I think about it, they might be onto something. 'Cause if thing showed up and it's like burn your children, I would do it. I'm not gonna say no to this thing.
I mean, if this guy told me to burn children, I'm
Golden bulls.
I was already pretty
Fires
inclined to
and
burn children in the
they
first
just
place.
throw
Now I'm
babies
definitely
into
doing
it.
it.
oh my god.
Gotta love that Old Testament stuff. Now, it's
Yeah.
not a secret that
Holy
several
Bible.
demon or demon-like gods are worshipped in the modern sense, although we don't really hear a lot about what they do. Whereas here, we see someone dressed as Moloch at a park on the day that the child he's taking a picture with was burned alive, and you see where I'm going with this. The idea is perhaps this guy, as a form of worship to this god, burned the children alive as several other children died in the train fire. This opens up the idea that some of these evil practices may still be occurring in the modern world. Neanderthal superiority is the idea that the main competitor with Homo sapien, Neanderthal, was actually the superior race. Basically, people who study like the evolution of humanity say that Neanderthal, who was our main competitor, who was possibly interbred with to create us, it's confusing. From the records of their technological capabilities, were actually the stronger people. However, yet
I feel like just like at the base of any like beginning of any sort of humanity, it's always incest. It is always incest.
It's always-
never not incest.
It has to be at some point.
they still seem to lose. And I mean lose in like the evolutionary sense. I mean, it's not like there was a tug of war game over, although there might have been. That would have been cool.
One big tug of war
Now,
game to
where
decide
they
humanity.
went, a lot of people say is just from a lack of resources and they died out. Although there's a lot cooler theories later.
Cooler theories. I like at the beginning of Iceberg trying to like rationally explain the theories, but as he's getting to tier 8, you want to hear the first two parts of tier 8, but as we get into tier 8, he starts going, alright, so this is what's commonly believed, but the cooler theory is...
The thing that's just more fun to
more
believe.
fun. Like before he was talking about, okay, so he literally said before in another one, so lame people believe, but cool people believe.
Let's go.
That was right after, and he said that right after he did the theory for JFK shot himself.
Okay, I was wondering if we had done that before, because
Yeah, JFK shot himself, man.
But for now, I want to mention the one throwaway one that I...
Also, you weren't here for the 4 people at the 4 corners of time are Jesus, Einstein, Socrates, and Bill Clinton. That was on here too.
Is that they eventually evolved into Bigfoot.
Yes.
Which is going to be the leading theory from now.
And he went
So
to
in this
Agartha.
Video, a Bigfoot is Neanderthal, although I'm going to retcon that one later.
Bigfoot.
But that's canon as of this moment. UFOs
Canon.
or atmospheric life forms is actually an idea that was originally brought forward.
Shoot Bigfoot with a cannon. I said Bigfoot, you said cannon. I combined the two.
Okay.
By Robert Ford. The guy I mentioned way back.
Nothing
in
I see makes sense.
40 in ideas.
40 in, yeah.
Supernatural. This was his doing. Basically, the idea of these energy beings or beings from a separate dimension is that UFOs aren't carriers from aliens from our plane of existence. Instead, there's other planes of existence, and they're crossing over, and that's either what they look like or what our brains and like stupid human eyes process them as. Keep in mind, when UFOs were originally spotted, they were described as sky beasts, so that would match up. There's a ton of theories when you go into this, from everything that it is an extraterrestrial, but it's simply sort of camouflaging itself to our eyes, to some even saying they are souls in the afterlife, just visible to the human consciousness.
It'd be so cool if I died and became a
what's more
UFO.
terrifying, the idea that there's like
I mean, that's.
100
I'd rather be a
things
UFO than a
inside
ghost.
that ship, or the giant ship itself is a living thing. Actually, now that I say it out loud, yeah, that's definitely more terrifying. Expanding Earth is the idea that over time the Earth is slowly getting bigger. In the modern sense, we can see that with things on the seafloor seemingly being relocated over the course of 100 years. And, you know, when it comes to conservation of mass, if there were things in our atmosphere that are now being harvested and turned into things on Earth, then that is slowly compiling to the overall size of it. This is even used as an explanation for continental drift and the idea of Pangea. The idea that they didn't break away and then float, they were sort of pushed apart as the Earth got bigger. And ideas such as global warming could be quite literally, since we're getting bigger, we're technically getting closer to the sun. Or, you know, there's the alternative theory that it's not because stuff's getting, you know, put on the Earth, it's that the Earth is expanding from the inside out. Which would
'Cause it's
probably mean
hollow.
that the inside was, I don't know.
Hollow.
Might have beat him to it. My bad.
Hey,
What the? Huh?
Forest stairs is a
What?
concept
he's slowly losing his mind as the iceberg continues. He's slowly losing his
Just
mind.
laughing at stairs.
I absolutely love, and even did an entire video on, which will be linked in the description. But short version, the forest stairs are these random staircases that seem to be found in remote parts of the forest. Most stories around them relate to the idea of someone going up to them and either hearing or seeing some sort of spatial anomaly, with some cases that happen whenever someone goes to them alone, where they either get mutilated or just die. The leading idea with this is that the stairs are sort of leakovers from other dimension, and directly interacting with them is kind of like staring at a glitch in a video game. Whenever you do it, you are therefore inserting yourself into the problem, which makes sort of the spatial anomalies interact with you. Everything happens to people who walk on the stairs or touch the railings, from they begin to lose all their hearing and start to hear noises that aren't there, to some where they just get eviscerated all at once, which is fun. Either way, the forest stairs exist in that perfect space of sort of neutral anomalies that exist in the mountains and the wilderness, and I, for one, absolutely love it. Nephilim protocols. So, Nephilim, if you didn't watch my Bible,
Giants.
Iceberg, is in relation to the concept of
Already said it.
Giants.
The Nephilim protocols.
I'm gonna
aren't
do it.
You're getting it,
specifically
you're getting
about
it
that. Essentially, there are these hidden files that exist on the deep web, which is a fancy way of saying a Tor browser, yada yada, that over time seem to be collecting data for an unknown reason. All of these files are encrypted, but they're each given a specific encryption key that if a certain event takes place, they will become open. Now, there's a lot of like rabbit holes to shoot down with this, but the short version is that anytime some public scandal comes out, they seem to compile more data. The idea is that these servers, named after giants for a pretty good reason, are compiling a ton of data about elites or secret sort of Watergate style events that happen around the world, and then for a reason that no one knows, they will become open and shed light on what the elites are doing. No one knows who's doing it, no one knows what opens them, but ideas range from everything that it is certain high up elitist members who are sort of staging an anti-coup, to it being the Illuminati, to some saying that it's quite literally giants themselves, which is my favorite theory and
Yes.
what I'm going with. I just imagine like
The
Oh, yeah, I
giant
think giant on a
cells.
computer, I think, is where he's going with this.
Yes, 100%.
I was gonna say that, and then I
underground in a
realized,
cave,
just imagining it.
like wearing the Morpheus outfit from the Matrix with the glasses, like on a giant keyboard, gathering information about Epstein, and it just makes me happy.
I'm not-
Atomic renovation.
I'm not even imagining like on a giant keyboard, just a small little keyboard
Small
that he's like one finger at a time pressing the buttons on.
Yes. All right.
is one of two theories. I think it's the latter, but I'll say both. The first one is the idea that the stereotypical American 50s, whenever people had the idea of the atomic family, was part of a docility program, essentially get people to accept this one way of living, so that way they don't think about the government around them or the concepts, which while there's a case to be made for that, I think it's actually referring to the second idea. The second idea is that atomic weapons were developed by governments as a means of immediately reclaiming a populace. Basically, think of it like this. If the evil lizard government gets together and decides that they can nuke a certain country because the people
I'm gonna
aren't-
refer to the entirety of the U.S. government as just the evil lizard people now.
100% at all times.
Like whenever all the evil lizard people meet up in the Senate, like that's just who they are.
By the way,
not
once
humans.
again, he slowly gets getting more insane and losing his mind. In the beginning of this Iceberg, if he had said that, everyone would have been like, "What? What are you talking about?" Now, no one bats an eye.
I mean, if you get through if you get through 8 parts of this, no one who's still here is completely sane.
Dude, this is literally the meme of, imagine you turn on part 1, you fall asleep, it goes on autoplay, you wake up, and he's going, alright, so the
JFK shot himself.
JFK
And
shot
you're just-
himself, the evil lizard government is calling it the atomic renovation.
doing well, then they can just nuke it, and then they can wait 30 years, and then they can go in and just reset it. So essentially, you renovate whatever group of people you don't like, if they're too insubordinate or whatever, and atomic weapons are essentially a giant reset button. So they weren't developed as an arm race or to better defend a country, as we're led to believe, basically as a giant system of population control. Since it's
Giant
everything
system?
has to do with your individual experience.
Let's not milk the
as a
giant
human.
titties, please. Let's just
Alright, we'll stop for
write
now.
it naturally.
Basically,
stop for now.
it's like this. You've heard concepts that your red is not my red, and that everyone smells different smells a certain way, or everyone tastes things a different way, and all of those senses have slowly been programmed into you over time. The interesting thing is, we don't really know what does that programming. Sure, people can see different shades of colors differently, but it's believed that that is a learned trait rather than a born one. So there are these hidden factors that exist around us that cause us to experience reality in the precise way that we experience it, creating a 100% unique humanity from every person to person. Paradigm recolescence is...
So, Mr. Rogers was right. We are all
Mr.
special.
Rogers was white.
Yeah, also true,
That
but...
was pretty obvious.
But he was right. We are special, okay? That was
I-
a positive conspiracy
Full
theory.
honesty, I lack like 3 of those senses. I can't smell anything. Clearly my eyesight's messed up. And my ears are constantly ringing. So my reality is just a hellscape.
Very nice.
a sort of expanding idea.
Well, that's a lot of big
when it comes
words.
to Technology of eventually getting.
I don't know
to
what
a
either of them mean.
point
I've
above
heard paradigm. I don't know what
consciousness.
recolescence
Think of
means.
it as like having an out-of-body experience that you can control.
I missed the spacebar like 4 times there. Another cool band name.
And interact with
Yes!
other minds. The idea behind it is
Let's go back. We were talking
of
over it.
expanding
We were.
person to person. Paradigm recolescence is a sort of expanding idea when it comes to technology of eventually getting to a point above consciousness. Think of it as like having an out-of-body experience that you can control and interact with other minds. The idea behind it is that we're really, really close. Like, think of everything technology can accomplish when it comes to medicine and psychology, and think if we can find a way to get consciousness out of the human body for a limited amount of time. A theory going a bit deeper than that. So there is this thing I've seen floating around whenever I talk about these sort of technological concepts on the iceberg called the Mariana Web. Essentially, it's supposed to be a very deep down part of the internet
ultimate deep
that
web,
is
yeah.
purely
Like Mariana's
data.
Trench.
It's supposed to be the hard files on how to make the Broder's engine that I talked about. It has all the schematics to build a GGG-QEP, which is the supercomputer I talked about, and the paradigm recolescence as well. The idea is these are technological things that will
And Obama's last name.
push humanity to the next level. And even though
It's Hussein.
we know how to do it, the elites or the powers that be are hiding
Thought it was Bin Laden.
because either we're not ready or they don't want us to have that power.
Obama bin Laden.
Essentially, somewhere there exists a super internet where we can make the next step in the technological revolution and become these super beings that can project our body and have infinite energy, and these forever computers and whatever. So if anyone can find it, I'll give you $5. Neolithic's contraption is close.
It's a good deal.
I really want those $5.
It ain't much, but it's honest work.
If anyone can do it, we'll give you half of it.
Yes.
Even though you just no, don't go to him. Don't go to us. Tell
Go to us, yes.
We'll get the $5. You'll get 2.5.
It's a good deal, trust me.
Closely related to the whole microchips found in dinosaur bones. Basically, looking at Neolithic devices or other ancient groups of people and the designs that they built, there's some interesting crossovers. For example, concepts like the aqueduct and even things like wind turbine engines had these sort of basic forms that were created in ancient society that we seem to forget about for 1,000 years and then reinvent later. So, think about this. You have us now,
Humanity's ultimate Iceberg.
who is making technology, and then
Great
imagine
reset,
that there was
again.
something like, I don't know, a great reset where all of humanity starts over. So then it continues on that pipeline, and then they begin to forget why they know some things, and then they're rediscovered. Essentially saying ancient world technologies that seemed quite advanced for their time are because of memories or remnants from technologies that existed in the previous generation of people. And I don't mean generation as in like their parents, I mean generation like the next cycle back. So these contraptions that were built thousands and thousands of years ago are due to contraptions that were built millions and millions of years ago. Iratus is something that if you're on this side of YouTube, I'm sure you've heard of before. Now there is an excellent video by Nexpo that I'm going to link in the description. He covers this in way better detail.
Was it Nexpo? I thought it was Blayman or Jorge.
But the short version
Made a video on this.
What?
I swear I saw a video of this. I thought it was by Blayman or Jorge. I get confused with Nexpo. They make similar content.
Basically, someone discovered that at UPS there was a word called erratus that they weren't supposed to ask about, and anyone who asked about it got fired. And after doing some digging, the original poster figured out that this exists across several companies, and erratus is essentially this program that compiles information about millions and millions of people and then throws it into assumedly a government database. Of course, this is super illegal.
So Facebook.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
But the idea behind
So weird way to
is
spell
that
Facebook, though.
it is a means of general
Hey, look, Mark Zuckerberg right there.
population control by knowing everything about what everyone's doing, etc. Where the
Zuckerberg's got some nice lips. Damn.
Golly, you got a long
comes
head.
in is that anyone who talks about Erratus online either gets shut down or silenced in some way. Now, Nexpo's video staying up after having like 3.6 million views about it kind of kills the fun there, but the idea of it being a super database that brings in information about everyone who seemingly just works normal jobs is still present. Diseases worship is exactly what it says. There are certain groups of society throughout history who have quite literally worshipped diseases. Examples of that would be gods like Sipano from older cultures that was quite literally the god of smallpox. So tie in what I said about the Black Plague earlier and put together this entire idea that if these great diseases that wiped out large portions of humanity were either extraterrestrial or supernatural in some way, then it would make sense for people to worship it, which would mean in the historical context they have the same energy of that as a sort of pagan god. And depending on how you feel about pagan gods or the ideas of lesser gods existing in the world, then it may stand to reason that diseases themselves are sort of expressions or at least punishments from these beings.
I love pagan gods. Just saying.
All right.
They're just cool.
Yeah.
Look into them more.
Because
All
several
right.
diseases seem to come out of nowhere, and why we believe that to be mutation, the theory is saying that it is in fact a divine, or I guess you could say anti-divine, whatever the correct word is for like other gods, I don't know. It's supernatural, honky wonky stuff. Animal plant hybrids relates to the overall idea of convergent evolution.
Honky.
Essentially, there have been modern microbes found that contain both plant and animal cells, leaving them as sort of like a perfect middle on what we understand as the biological trees. And if things can be observed in the modern times heading that direction, then potentially a way long time back, things from one tree jumped over to the other. Or the idea that all of biology itself is slowly going towards that perfect middle or perfect creature. Also, there were a bunch of like old middle-aged legends of
It goes the how the theory and evolution where if you keep evolving to be more adaptable to the environment, eventually that means everything's going to a perfect creature. So
Crabs.
The crabs, yes, crab theory.
Things keep evolving into crabs, and I don't know why. Also, 12 billion of them are just gone. They're just missing. We don't know where they went. How do you lose 12 billion crabs?
How do you just lose them? Also, it makes sense because like horse crabs, that what they're called.
I think they're called horseshoe crabs, but
Yeah,
they're
horseshoe
like
crab.
not actually crabs. Like they're not in the crab.
Well, they've
family or
also
something, right?
existed for like 160 million years without evolving at all.
Or maybe not that, but like yeah, there are just so many species that look exactly like what a crab is, and they're like called whatever crab. They're not a part of the same family that like actual true crabs
So
are.
they actually evolved just into crabs. But horseshoe crabs have like existed for like 160 million years without evolving, needing to evolve at all. They just exist.
Of like trees that like.
So maybe they're the ultimate creature that everyone's evolving into.
Will we be crabs? Will we become crabs?
Maybe.
Crab humans?
Babies or like
We do the great reset by becoming crabs.
these bushes and cabbages that made like goats and stuff. So that's related, I guess. Sky Snag theory is saying that UFOs are the pure result of a chemical reaction in the air. Essentially, whenever two conflicting air waves hit each other at great speeds, or there's sort of a crosswind, the friction that's produced between them, along with the trace particles in them, starts to form essentially a snowball that keeps expanding. That sort of aluminum sphere that's created seems to be a UFO to us, but is actually an accumulation of whatever trace metals or other particles are floating around in the sky. This is saying not only are UFOs just objects in the air, but can also be induced by governments. So if they want to encourage a UFO sighting in some place, all you got to do is release a bunch of trace elements into the air, make the airstreams go together, which we've well established at this point in the iceberg, the government controls the weather, and then boom, you've got...
We've already established that. It's
would
not even a
also explain
question
the perfect
at this
shape
point in the iceberg.
Because the sphere is created because they're like perfectly adding the atoms wherever they seem fit, and that's why it's a circle. Also, every single video describing this or like animation describing it is really creepy and unsettling, and I'll let you find that for yourself. That is your homework. Have fun with that.
I'm terrified.
Which
I'm
stands
doing it.
for
Okay.
World of Ice or World in Ice, something like that, is also known as
Velted
glacial cosmogony.
Slip.
It was an idea brought forward by Hans Herbinger, whatever, in the early 19th
Hamburger.
century as an idea of the existence of humanity. The story's really long, but short
Cheeseburger.
version is one
Big
night
Mac
he was looking
Whopper.
at the moon and realized that the iridescence of it is exactly that. of
Iridescence.
ice. And then after having a dream in which he was shown the cosmos and how ice broke apart and formed everything as we know it, he came to the idea that the base root of everything in the known universe was ice. Essentially, the theory says that trace amounts of hydrogen went through the air, and then they froze in the depths of space and created ice, and then those were broken apart, and that's what led to modern life. And water and life and oxygen and everything like that comes from melted or different versions of ice itself. This also relates to really old world ideas that on every side of the earth were essentially these giant ice walls, which is actually a theory that's still put forward by some flat earth believers, that around every corner of the earth are these giant walls of ice that hold in the barriers of what we know, or essentially the reason the world may be expanding is because it's melting outwards. Also, several old stories like in Norse mythology talked about giants beyond the ice wall. That's not related to this, I just had to mention that. And also these ideas of the belted area.
He just had to. He
And
couldn't
the
help.
opportunity for
He
giants.
couldn't help himself.
He saw giants and was just like wrote it down as a little note. You have to include giants.
I imagine it. In his other room, he's acting like he's all casual with the conspiracy theories. He opens that closet behind him. There's an entire wall with red lines going all across the end,
Just like-
and they all converge onto one thing. And it just says giants.
This whole channel is just to like produce mass funding for an operation to go find giants.
Dude, I would just, dude, I would pay money to watch Wendigoon goes to Antarctica to find giants.
That sounds amazing. I'd go with him.
Led to
I'd
a
volunteer
lot
for the expedition.
of the
I'd be a little bit scared of the
research that
giants.
happened in World War II into theories
Or Wendigoon himself is actually a giant, and he's rebelling and revealing his
That
secrets.
the room he's in is just really, really big.
Yeah, bro, he's in Agartha right now, bro. Everyone knows Agartha loved Travis Scott.
the occult and all of that, so that's something. Cosmic Censorship Cottage.
Sorry, I'm just imagining like like the whole like theory that like in Agartha Hitler's down there. I'm just
Yeah.
imagining him like bopping to like Goosebumps or something.
Bruh, that.
I'm convinced is a typo. And I
He's a-
know that
he has to be a
nothing
big
else on
Kanye
here's
fan.
been a typo, and that doesn't make sense, but you also got to realize this iceberg was made by one person, and you also got to realize I spent like a day searching everywhere on the internet, all of my resources for where cosmic censorship cottage goes together, and it's nowhere. However, there is a very known thing called the cosmic censorship conjecture, which I'm going to retcon here and say that's what he meant. Because cottage, for one, doesn't make sense here. There's a term that would
Jeez.
fit on this iceberg that has a very closely related word, or at least spelling related there. And I have no idea how cottage could tie into this at all. So it's conjecture now. Just saying that now. The cosmic censorship conjecture is an idea that relates to things like black holes. So in the realm of physics, there are several things that we get to known as singularities. These are points where either gravity reaches an infinite point, or mass reaches an infinite point, or whatever. The reason black holes are a big example of that is because gravity goes to such a point that mass's weight goes to a near infinite. So every time that we get to one of these singularities, something really weird happens. That's where the idea of like E equals mc squared and other ideas that Einstein came up with come from. The idea that if you reach a theoretical infinite in energy, you can do really wonky things like travel through time. Or I should say a near infinite speed, but whatever, same thing. Basically, it's like there's these hard walls with our understanding of what we can do in physics that we just can't seem to break. Things like starting a black hole, despite our lack of trying with things like the Hadron Collider, or breaking the speed of light. However, anytime that happens in our known world, anytime that something breaks those rules of physics, there's like a weird veil put over it. Like a black hole, right? The reason it's called a black hole is because it carries such weight that light itself cannot escape the pool, which is a really wild concept to think about, but that doesn't mean nothing's going on there. It doesn't mean it's an empty space. It's just that
The
from
devs are
our
trying to hide
rules
it.
of observation,
It's a
whenever
glitch.
something gets to such a wide
Black holes are just like hot fixes that they just gotta quickly put
Black
in
hole
place.
is like when you know how the textures in Gary's mod.
It's just like the error symbols.
Yeah, it's like the purple and black.
point in physics, it's impossible for us to view it. The same with something traveling faster than the speed of light. If something were to do that, we would have no way of seeing that or processing what it's doing. It would simply occur. The cosmic censorship conjecture is that anytime something is allowed to break our rules, we're not allowed to watch it. Now, if you want to get into the idea that that's God, that we're in a simulation, and those are
Yeah, that's what I
like
was
the
saying.
parameters set by the CPU we're in, or whatever other theories you have, it's saying that whenever something does something that we ourselves can't, we're not allowed to look at it. This
The giant spaghetti monster is not letting us see.
God damn you. Giant spaghetti monster.
Maybe it is the giant. Maybe that's what black holes are. They're just fragments of the giant spaghetti monster that we're not allowed to
It
look
is
at.
called, when you do get stuck into a black hole, what do they call it? Spaghettification.
Really?
No joke.
That's what they call getting sucked into a black hole spaghettification.
Look up right now.
Wait, who coined this term?
I think it's like the official, like, actual term for it. Look up term for getting sucked into a black hole.
Okay, hold on, viewers.
Hold on.
Viewers at home, feel free to do your own research onto this, but
Always make sure to do your own research at home.
no, just believe everything we say.
Yes.
You know those like little blue worms in your skin? You search it up. I can't think of what you told me to say. You know those little blue worms in your skin? Just rip them out. Strip them out. They're put there by the government. Don't think about it. Don't Google it. Just do it. Little blue worms in your skin. Rip them out.
Oh, yeah. God damn it. Term for getting sucked into a black hole. If it'll load.
We're not professionals, in case you could tell.
Wait, no. Wait.
You clicked my other tabs.
Oh, shit, sorry. Spaghettification.
Jesus Christ. Okay,
Yeah.
now I'm actually convinced that this giant spaghetti monster.
The official term is sunk to a black hole, spaghettification.
The
This is why
scientists
some
know
theorize
it.
that maybe if we could see into a black hole, we would see the,
The devs.
supernatural or the afterlife or some other really out there concept that we can't really understand. Because there's no specific rules that just because mass gets so heavy we no longer can see it. It's, again, just like a sort of veil draped over our heads. So all of these gaps in our understanding of how the world works may not be accidental, but purposefully put there by someone or something. And that'll do it for Tier 8 of...
Alright, so that is it for Tier 8 of the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg. If you like Hayden here, I didn't even say their name.
I don't have a
entire
name. It's fine. I'm just the guy who couldn't open a fucking Sour Patch Kids.
Yeah, if you want to see Hayden more, make sure to do this little thing called commenting and say, hey, we want to see Hayden more. Or if you don't, please tell me. And I will murder his entire family.
Please, I'll look at the comments on pretty much any of his videos and I'll cry. I will cry.
Yeah, okay, so, if you want them more, then comment that. If you just want me, or if you just want them, then also comment that. That could also be a possibility, and I'll just rebrand the entire channel.
It's my channel now. I'm Lyric Rumbles.
Yes, you are Lyric Rumbles. Okay, yeah, we'll see you in part 9 next week. Bye.